In Abigail, a pack of criminals kidnap a young girl, only to discover that they're trapped in a spooky mansion with a vampire. This one comes from the radio silence team behind Ready or Not and the recent Scream movies, so let's see if this one sucks. Get it? Because vampires? Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tim.
Hey, how's it going?
Do you know, I thought you may hit me with a quote, because there's a line at one point in this movie where someone says, "Thanks for the insight, Peter," and I thought you might use that at some point, but
no, my memory's not that good.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Besides, when have you said anything insightful?
Well, it was sarcasm. I don't know why I said that. It was sarcasm. It was sarcasm. Yeah, welcome to the show. It's a horror movie podcast, and we're going to talk about Abigail today, one of the big releases from earlier in the year. Finally getting to it. The girl vampire movie from Radio Silence. So we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. And if you are enjoying the discussion, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do. And yeah, there's some bonus content you can get on Patreon. We'll tell you more about that at the end, but we'll get into the movie film. I mean, I guess expectations going into this, based on how we felt about Radio Silence's previous movies, is probably worth discussing.
Sure.
Yeah, because we, despite the rest of the horror community on the internet, we're pretty lukewarm on Ready or Not.
Right.
Right. You were fairly positive on Scream 5. I was kind of lukewarm in that. I didn't think it was bad. I liked it more than Ready or Not.
Yeah.
I almost said Ready Player One there.
Oh, God.
Very different movies. I mean, the sentence is still true. I did like Scream 5 more than Ready Player One, because Ready Player One sucked. I like Scream 6 more than that, though. So, like, out of the three movies they've done, I guess they technically, for me, got progressively better.
Yeah. I mean, same for me, even though, I mean, I guess the order would be the same. The degrees are a little different, because I did like Scream 5 better. But, I mean, yeah, still the same order.
You've got a different curve. You sort of curve up sort of quickly.
Pete, we're not supposed to talk about that.
So, you know, the trailer for this was okay. I think more than anything, the premise sounded fun.
Yeah.
A bunch of, people, criminals kidnap a girl, but it turns out she's a vampire, and they're trapped in a mansion with her. Okay. It's a solid premise. That's the sort of thing that could have been made any time in the last 50 years. There's nothing about it that feels specific to this era, which is good, and that's not a complaint. I actually like that. I'm sick of movies that feel too baked into our era.
You mean you don't want to see like a movie about a cursed TikTok video or something like that?
I cannot tell you how little I want to see that. I'm not saying it couldn't be good. Like, someone will have a good idea and the execution will work, but by and large, no, I do not want to see that.
Right.
Just for the record. I actually forgot, because I remember Melissa Barrera, who of course was in Scream 5 and 6, was going to be in this, but I did not remember from the trailer that both Dan Stevens and Kathryn Newton were going to be in this, and they're just minor parts either, though. It's kind of an ensemble with like 5 or 6 main characters, and Kevin Durand's in there as well, who's another face I recognize. And
which one's Dan Stevens? Was he like the main kind of leader guy?
Yeah, that was Dan Stevens. Yeah.
Okay. What else has he been in? I didn't really recognize him.
Oh, I mean, he was in The Guest. He was in.
Okay.
He was in Legion, the TV show. He was in.
I never saw that.
He was in Godzilla X Kong most recently, I guess.
The newest one?
The newest one, yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, but he's been in a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you got him. Kathryn Newton, for horror movie fans, was in Freaky. People may also know her from Big Little Lies. She was like the teenage daughter in that. And then Kevin Durand's one of those.
She was Lisa Frankenstein too, right?
Oh yeah, she was. Yeah, that's a good point. That tells you how quickly that movie left my brain. And then Kevin Durand was like, I first saw him in Lost, but he's the sort of actor that's been popping up in things for like 20 years at this point.
Okay. I don't remember him from Lost, but I definitely he had a familiar face.
I want to say, without spoiling too much, I want to say he was one of the characters on the boat, and I vividly remember a scene with him cooking eggs. while being threatening.
Okay.
But it's been a while. Right. It's been a while. He's been in
I do think I'm
though.
due for a Lost rewatch.
So do I. You know what? I've not watched it since it finished in 2010. I think I would enjoy it. God, it's been 14 years since that finished.
Oh, jeez.
Not even started, since it finished.
Wow.
Oh, dear. And then there's also a small role for Giancarlo Esposito, who most will probably know from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. So always nice to see him. And that's actually most of the cast. Obviously, you got Alicia Weir as Abigail, the titular vampire, if you will. We haven't mentioned William Catlett, who I actually do recognize. He's the other one of the group who I did recognize. I couldn't have told you for the life of me, though, what I'd seen him in before. This is what I saw him in. He was in Constellation earlier this year. It was an Apple TV show he was in. I knew I saw him from something. Yeah, I mean, it got cancelled after one season, so it's not a surprise. Okay. But I knew his face from something. And then the only one that we've not even mentioned yet, because obviously it's a pretty tight cast, and that's everyone barring Angus Cloud, who got a dedication in the credits at the end. And I went, oh, who's that? What? And I looked it up, and yeah, he died last year of an accidental drug overdose. He was only 25 years old, which I'm glad I saw the dedication and looked that up, because I will tone back my complaining about him a little bit, so I don't have to feel too bad. But I do think his character was the most annoying character in the movie.
I'm assuming he's like the what would you even say? Like he's the driver guy.
Yes, he's the driver.
Okay. Yeah. No shade to the actor at all, because he played the part how it should have been played, but the character was kind of annoying.
Yeah, every time he opened his mouth, I'm like, and again, this sounds almost poor taste given the fact that the actor passed away, but every time he opened his mouth, I was like, oh my God, can he just die, please?
Right. Yeah.
Like weird timing with that. Obviously super young, so kind of sad to hear that. But that's the whole cast, pretty much. Well, barring one little surprise, but other than that,
surprise.
That's all the cast members. That's the whole movie.
All right, just say it. Crash Bandicoot makes an appearance.
Yes, Crash Bandicoot.
Imagine how crazy that would be.
It might have perked me up at the end of the movie, I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of playing my hand a little bit here. Tim, what did you think of Abigail?
So it's interesting, because cat knocked something over. Okay. Yeah, because I do remember when the trailer came out, it seemed like, a lot of people were fairly excited for this. And then I don't really remember hearing much about it after it came out. Like, neither really positive or negative. Like, I think I knew a few people that liked it. I'm pretty sure Matt was a pretty big fan of it. But yeah, like I just don't remember hearing that much about it. So I'm not really sure if this is like a hot take or anything, but I don't know, I just thought the movie was like okay. Like it's one of those things where I don't think there's like on a technical level that there's really much wrong with it. Like, I think it looks fine. I do think the premise is pretty fun. I mean, you mentioned all the actors. Like, I do think, these were all like pretty fun characters for the most part. But I don't know, like just watching it, I don't know, just didn't really do much for me. And it's not like in a super negative way. Like, it's not like I hated it. Like, it's a perfectly reasonable, whatever, I'm guessing 90, 100 minutes or something.
It's actually 110 minutes. It was closer to the 2 hour mark.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a complaint that I probably could have been cut down at least a little bit. But I mean, there's a few ideas here and there that were kind of interesting or a little fun. I would say, I mean, one big thing, and this always really hurts me with vampire movies, but if I don't like the look of the vampire, that is really like, that's a big negative for me. I'm sorry, I just did not think the vampires look cool. I hope that's not a spoiler.
There's a vampire in it, Tim. Yes. People know this.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I understand why they did it, but I do think it would have been really interesting if
marketing didn't spoil that there was a vampire.
Yeah, and I understand because how many people would have seen it if without that or whatever.
I mean, from the sounds of not a lot of people saw it anay, but yeah, it's a fair point.
True. But it would have been really interesting to just go in blind and then be like, holy shit. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's always kind of harder to talk about things like this because, like, well, I don't think it was like super bad. Like, I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh, this was so dumb, this was so dumb. But it also just didn't really like do anything to elevate itself to me where I'm like, oh man, I love this. Like, so I'm just really in the middle, just like, yeah, it was okay, it was fine.
Yeah, I think the sad part is I really like the premise. I think the premise is A+, and I think
Agreed,
there is an amazing version of this movie that could be made. However, and I'm happy a movie like this gets made in the sense that I'm happy that this just kind of fun little idea that that they can make a movie out of is still getting made. This sort of little AA budget kind of thing. If it's even...
not based on a comic book, it's not the start of the Abigail cinema universe. It's
if it was successful, they might have tried that. You never know.
Sure, yeah.
But I think the more it went on, the more I found myself just sort of sinking away from, like, because I started off kind of optimistic and I was kind of giving it all the chance that I could really give it, and it just every single element of it is just a little underwhelming, right? The vampire stuff just never quite hits good territory. The characters are never quite likable or engaging enough. They're not terrible for the most part, but they're never quite there. The shooting style is fine, but it's a little bit made for Netflix looking to me. Like, it's a bit bland in a lot of ways. The violence or gore is never like quite at there. It's not terrible, but it's not like everything's just a little bit under that underwhelming line. And when everything's at that level, I think it almost compounds to feeling even more negative for me by the end, where once you get to the last like 20 minutes of this movie, and it's more of just sort of like carnage, like lots of CG action going on, as opposed to, I don't know, something that's more of an actual horror movie, I probably would have liked a bit more, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah,
I agree. I do think, I don't know, and it's not like the worst sin of the movie or whatever, but sometimes it did seem a little tough to kind of gauge the tone of it, because sometimes it did seem like it was trying to be flat out comedy, but then I don't know, it is also kind of doing, like, it seems like it wants to do these moments that are touching, every now and again, and I don't know, I didn't feel like the movie really warranted that much. Maybe if I cared about the characters a lot more, it would be more justified, but I was kind of rolling my eyes when it would like try to get serious or whatever. I'm like, I don't really need this.
Yeah, that didn't work for me. I don't know if it needs touching elements, and if it was trying to pull them off, I don't think it succeeded in any way. I think you can do a light-hearted version of this story that's more fun, which is obviously what this movie's trying to be, but I think it just kind of misses the mark for me, just because I still want to have fun building up to the kills and whatnot, or whatever it may be. And instead, I can see lots of like potential scenarios where characters are trying to solve problems, like, okay, how do we get out of the house? How do we do this? How do we do that? The discovery that the character is a vampire. Instead, well, there's some of that, obviously. There's definitely a large extended portions where the movie's much more focused on who all the characters actually are, because they're all using code names, because they're part of a criminal group like Reservoir Dogs, so they're all using assumed names. And a big chunks of the movie, both early on when they're just kind of mingling with each other, and then later on when Abigail, there's a scene, and this isn't spoiling too much, but there's an extended period where they manage to lock her up for a bit, and there's just like the movie just grinds to a halt, and we have this like, oh, we're just going to learn a bunch of things about every character for over the course of like what felt like 10 minutes. It probably wasn't quite that long, but it felt like a long time. It felt like everything just stopped and we started doing that instead. And I don't think I was ever that into the movie again after that point. I wasn't super into it before, but I think that's the point where I kind of was just losing interest, and I was losing interest in everything we're doing. The characters' backstories just were never quite enough. I think radio silence for me at this point, like, I like Scream 6, but I like Scream 6 in a way that was like, okay, these are fun, inventive set pieces for what to do with Ghostface. These are fun, inventive uses of the location. the plot wasn't actually that good, right? And the characters were fun because the character or the actors portraying them were kind of fun, and the tone kind of worked for a Scream movie because Scream's meant to be that kind of meta thing. But there's definitely moments in this where a character would be like, oh my god, are we actually talking about vampires right now? And I'm like, oh my, shut up with this like self-aware meta nonsense. Like, it's fine for Scream because that's what Scream is, but I am so sick of it being a thing across the board now in movies. Like, I just don't want it. It just turns me off from anything you're doing, because now it's like, you know, it also, I should love anything that involves people exploding into blood, but somehow Radio Silence now have done this in multiple movies where I actually think it's really underwhelming how they do it somehow. And it's not like they're personally doing the effects, but whatever directions they're giving to the effects team makes it just shit to me. I'm like, Scanners, this is not.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't look great. Yeah, I would say the humor is pretty hit or miss, probably verging more on the miss side. There was like a few times I like, you know, chuckled here and there, so I can't say it's like totally. Well,
I think it's going back to what I was saying before. It's not like super bad. It's just always underwhelming, right? Yeah. It's never like tragically, horrendously unfunny. It's just like, oh, it's either vaguely amusing or it's like, that was kind of lame, and that's it. That's your range.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you can kind of feel like the writeriness of it. Like it feels like,
what a word, Tim. What a word.
Like, I don't know. Like, sometimes there are just certain lines where you can tell, like, oh, the writer really like must have thought like, oh, this is a really funny line when they're writing it.
This is a banger. I mean? Oh, this is gonna pop the crowd. Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's so many times where like characters would be like stupid dancing vampire, like, I don't know, that I just feel like they thought like, oh, it's so funny if we keep calling her like a ballerina vampire, a dancing vampire, or like, oh, isn't it funny that she's like a ballerina like a little kid but she's also a vampire, like, isn't that just inherently like funny? And I don't know, almost we maybe would have liked maybe a more of like a serious take or something where, yeah, because she never really felt like super intimidating to me. Like, it always just felt like it was like, oh, like, isn't it funny that it's like a little girl? But, you know, versus, you know, something like Let the Right One In, where that also has like a little girl vampire, but she's like absolutely terrifying.
I mean, yeah, you're not doing this movie any favors by making me think of Let the Right One In. No, I agree. The Abigail herself has zero, like, I don't know, zero intimidation, zero presence. There's no mystique about her, really. Like, you can do a campy vampire and I can enjoy it. Like, maybe I couldn't when I was younger, but, you know, when we did Fright Night, I was like, you know what, I actually see the charm in this now. This is actually working for me with the right kind of mood and vibe. And I think this falls into...
Someday I'll get you to appreciate Lost Boys.
Oh, it's a tall order, but all right. We'll see what you can do there. But
maybe that might be a good Octoberthon movie this year.
I disagree. Why? Why this year?
Oh, we haven't done it.
There's lots of movies we haven't done.
Yeah, we'll get to them all eventually.
Yeah. So Lost Boys can be eventually. We've got other things we could get to instead. Like literally anything else.
All right, we'll start with Children of the Corn.
Oh yeah, all 10 Children of the Corn movies. Let's wire into that franchise.
Oh, it's cute. You think there's only 10, not 25.
Yeah, Abigail herself, I just think doesn't have much going for her ultimately. Like, I feel like they had an opportunity here to either have her be like a creepy kind of sympathetic character, like a Let the Right One In It, you know, Eli, or possibly like a new kind of like, I don't know, zeitgeist type villain that kind of becomes very popular because she's so intimidating and kind of could be iconic even if you wanted to go down that kind of path where she's actually kind of scary for whatever reason. But they don't even achieve the meme status of something like a Megan because there's that one funny dance scene. They don't even have that. It kind of feels like they want her to be the new Megan in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel like Megan really ate this movie's lunch by just like I don't know if they're like, oh man, we can't even top that, or I don't know, but I mean yeah it feels like it's just kind of wasted. I will give it credit. Like I don't want to get too into it because it'll probably be something more for spoilers. But there was like one interesting idea I liked, and is maybe when I perked up the most. And I'll just say what ends up happening with Kathryn Newton's character. I thought that was like an interesting idea and something I hadn't really seen before. But I mean, that's just kind of like one part of the movie, you know.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, almost the more vampire-y things it did, the less interested I was getting.
Yeah.
In a weird way. It's one of those things where if you start treating vampires a certain way, I just don't like it that much, and I just wasn't feeling a lot of the characters' attitudes towards everything just wasn't working for me. Like, they should be goddamn terrified and shocked of what they've just seen when they first learn she's a vampire, and instead it's like, whoa, vampires, really? Oh, should we get some garlic? What do we like? You know, it's like almost like a stand-up comedy bit. What's the deal with these vampires?
And you know what's probably like the worst part about it for me is like I will say I really like the setting. I don't really think they used it much to their advantage, but I love, you know, like an old creepy house. Like it was giving me RE1 kind of vibes. And yeah, I like that they're trapped in it and having to explore it, but the potential in that is that, you know, you're in this strange place and, you know, you're constantly exploring and you have no idea where, you know, the bad guy is. But with this, a lot of the movie, it seemed like the bad guy was always just kind of in one spot, and like they confront her a little bit and then run away, and then like she would just stay there until...
You're right. It's not an engaging. Yeah, it's too. Yeah, on you go.
Well, like, it should be like, you know, like Resident Evil 2. Sorry for all the Resident Evil comparisons, but like, you know, like, you know, when you're exploring and you never know where Mr. X is gonna be, and like, you know, you could open the door and he could be there, or you could be walking and he could just burst through somewhere. You know, it should be this menace that you have no idea where it is, but instead it just felt like, you know, like they were just constantly, oh, let's go back to the safe room and we'll go confront her once we are ready or whatever. Like, I don't know, I just never got a sense, again, like she was a very looming, scary presence. It was just always like, all right, she's there. What should we do? Let's think about it. And, you know, that was annoying.
Yeah, there's zero tension for most of the movie. I mean, I think that's ultimately what you're getting. I mean, you're sort of describing one of the reasons why there's no tension, but I think that's ultimately the problem with what you're saying there, is that there's just not that much tension. And part of it is we almost always know where she is. Part of it is that it just isn't taking itself quite seriously enough to really, like, care about the threat to anything, which is fine. Like if you want to have the tone of, like, a... you know, an 80s slasher movie. I love 80s slasher movies. I'm fine with a bunch of dumb characters getting killed one by one, but you still kind of treat it like a big deal when someone dies, or you still, like, there's something very kind of toothless, you know, ironically almost, given how much teeth, Abigail has in this, right? It's like, she's got the fangs, but all the other teeth are all pretty sharp too. They went for the sort of all sharp kind of vibe, right?
That's going back to just not really liking the look of that.
It's not my favorite either. At least not the way they show it in this. Like, I don't mind all the teeth being sharp, but when I think of it, I'm thinking more of like a Nosferatu thing. Whereas here, it was more like,
of course, yeah.
This was almost like I don't know, something I'd see on like a monster rather than a vampire.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
It just like looked kind of distracting. Like, I don't know. Whenever they would show it, I was always just kind of like I was thinking about it too much instead of just being like, oh, that's like scary. Oh, that looks cool. I was just like, I don't like that.
Do you think they touched that up with CG? Because maybe that's why it was sticking out too much.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it had a bit of a unnatural look to it, and I wonder if that's maybe what I really didn't like about it more than anything.
Well, there's just no way to you know, make teeth that look like this that we can put in someone's mouth. Like, of course we have to use computers. Like, I mean,
well, yeah, but what if they did do that and then decide they hated how the fake teeth look, so they had to like CG over it? That's always a possibility.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. Although
We're looking at you, Sonic.
Watch just cut to some like set photos here, and like it's like on set, like the actress had just like green teeth in because they were going to always CG it or something like that. I don't know if they did.
I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be one of our freaky listeners that is gonna be like, well, actually, this was all practical, and here's the proof, and they're gonna comment on it and expect us to issue some 3,000 word apology. But guess what? It's not gonna happen.
I mean, no. I mean, if it's practical, it's practical. I'm just putting forth an idea as to why it looks off. If it is completely practical, it doesn't change my opinion that it looks bad.
No, that's true. Yeah.
You know, it still looks like some practical effects look bad. Being practical doesn't instantly make something look good. Lots of bad looking movies were made before the 1990s. You know, like they existed.
Practical magic.
Are you just referencing a random witch movie from like 1998 right now? Is that what's happening?
It had practical in the title.
It did, but I don't know if you know how references work, Tim. That's like me saying in the next sentence something like, oh, I mentioned, oh, there's an orange in this scene, and then you go, oh, you ever seen a Clockwork Orange? Like, yes, they share a word.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll move on. All right. I guess it's probably just time to get into spoilers so we can start talking about everything in depth. Because I don't know how to dance around anything anymore. But I will say. No, it wasn't an intentional pun. It was natural speech. But I'm not mad that the pun.
Oh, the King's Speech
happened naturally. Stop it. Stop it. Okay. Right. One thing I will say before we get to spoilers actually is that I do think there's some character beats would have been more effective if they actually did more with the characters before the turns happened. Like, I mean, okay, I'll just leave that there and we'll get into spoilers. So spoilers for Abigail from this point forward. You have been warned. So the first like 10 minutes of the movie is the heist. Right, I mean that's basically it. It's the kidnapping of the girl. It shows you some of the characters getting picked up and like how they break into the mansion and they take the girl, they knock her out with a syringe, which does seemingly work. And I actually was a little bit confused by this because our main character Joey checks Abigail's pulse after like they've knocked her out, and she says, "Yeah, that's it, she's out, perfect." And I thought, oh, is she faking it? Because I'm like, vampires, like, and admittedly, each vampire movie or universe can make its own rules, right? And this movie certainly has its own quirks on its rules as the movie goes on. But typically, one of the things that's very consistent is that vampires won't have a pulse.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, like, this wouldn't be a relevant test. But it never comes up again later, like, because they managed to knock her out again later, and it's like, yeah, it's worked. So I think it just works. So fair enough, I guess. Yeah, I mean, hey, it can have its own rules. That's fine. But yeah. So I mean, just to actually go down the characters here. So I mean, ultimately, there's not too much to say before they get to the mansion that they're going to be spending the night with Abigail. Other than that, it does some teases of who the characters are. So I guess the scene I'll also mention here, just to set this up, is that once they've put Abigail in a room and they've had the instructions from Gus. What's his name? This Lambert. Yeah, from Giancarlo Esposito. They're told not to use real names, of course, right? But they're all having a drink in the bar, and basically they're all sort of making guesses about something about each other, who they are. And it ends up being the main character, Joey, Melissa Barrera's character, who's like, oh, I can guess some stuff. And she basically points out a bunch of things, including that Dan Stevens' character, Frank, was a cop, right? He used to be a cop. The way he carries himself, the way he gives out orders, whatever, sets up him, and he's got a kind of a history after, and we find out more of this later, but he was undercover and he got really in deep and started to like the life of crime and went down whatever path. Joy herself is an addict who has been clean for some time and is doing this job to get money so she can go back to her son. That's your sob story for the movie. She will make a teary phone call to her son and leave him a message later on, which is one of the moments in the movie where I went, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
I don't care about your stupid son.
For the most part, I did like the character, and I thought Melissa Barrera did a pretty good job. It was nice to see her again after it's kind of all that controversy around the next Scream movie and everything. But I was happy to see her. But yeah, with scenes like that when she's just getting all teary and talking about her son and all that stuff. Again, it just felt like, okay, this is really the tone that I need for this movie.
Well, I mean, it's not even just the tone you need; it's the tone they've not established for this movie.
Yeah,
the tone. Well, I do think the tone's a little bit wonky. They are clearly going for this more light-hearted kind of romp style tone, which is fine. And they do some things with the main character as well to like, okay, she stops the other guy from punching the kid at the start. In fact, she's even surprised that they're kidnapping a kid. She thought it was an adult, and she's kind of feeling mixed feelings about it. So they're giving us reasons to empathize with her, that she's kind of the good one, that she has some morals, that she isn't a complete villain, even though she's helping with a kidnapping, that she might be the good person in the team. Although, to be honest, I feel like there's only one or two of them that actually come across as being mostly bad. Like, they kind of play some of them as just kind of being, I don't know, just nice enough. Like Kathryn Newton, who's like the hacker girl. That's her character.
Yeah. Yeah, like everyone else seems like kind of like, what's the word? Like they're, I don't know, like a little like fake or whatever. Like they say, Kathryn Newton is like, oh yeah, like she comes from money, but she's like trying to be rebellious, and doesn't really have any reason to be doing this. And then I think the other guy, the driver guy, like they said, I think they were saying like, oh, he's not like, what they say, like, oh, he's not like a professional. I don't know if they're implying that like he hasn't really done this kind of stuff before or whatever. But yeah, like no one, aside from Frank, who you can kind of tell like early on is gonna kind of be like a bad guy, an adversary. Yeah, no one else felt like super evil or anything.
Yeah, which is weird, because if you wanted to do a more serious take on this story, you'd probably try and deal with the fact that these characters should at least start off kind of being unlikable because they're kidnapping someone, right? They're morally grey characters. It's like they should be more interesting than this, I guess, but like they're not that interesting, and that's kind of sad in a sense. They're pretty
like one-dimensional, like
yeah, I think that's it. Because you've got Rickles, William Cartlett's character, and he's like an ex-marine or something like that. They kind of just allude to that. They don't say much about it, but they just imply that he used to be military. Kevin Durand's character is kind of the big muscle guy, and he's a bit of an idiot, but he's kind of a nice guy, I guess. Like that's his whole thing. And that's pretty much it. Like there's not a whole lot of meat to the characters beyond the main couple, and the main couple of them I do think are a little, I don't know, like I say, like all the stuff with Melissa Barrera wanting to like get clean to go back to her son, and all the stuff with Frank being this corrupt cop. I felt like one of my big problems with the movie, especially as it was getting on later into the story, is that it felt like by the time we get to the end and Frank's become a vampire and he starts like being the main villain, because he becomes the main villain, he's more of the villain of the movie than Abigail is at a certain point.
Yeah.
And once it gets to that point, all I could think was, see if you'd actually had him like soften over the movie and maybe even feel like he was bonding with Joey or some of the others, and then it would be like surprising or like a big deal that he chooses to become a vampire when he does. That might actually have landed a bit harder, but it felt like he just didn't change the entire movie. So when that got to that point and he made this literal change by becoming a vampire, and then he's just the villain, I'm like, well, this doesn't feel like a betrayal, because it didn't feel like you got even remotely close to anyone. It felt like you built no alliances. It felt like you didn't, like no one was starting to trust you. They were still an equally sort of like, can we trust him footing as they had been the entire thing. So there was no intrigue to it.
It's also, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily like a bad thing or I guess, but it's like his motivations are constantly changing throughout the movie. Like, first he just wants money, then he just like wants to get out, then he like wants to be a vampire, then he wants to like control this criminal empire.
Yeah, he's kind of like a one character fits all kind of guy. And I like Dan Stevens well enough. I just did not find this character all that engrossing at all.
Yeah, I would say like all the actors in this movie did like pretty good jobs. Like I don't think anyone was necessarily like that weak or anything. It's just all kind of comes down to the script, really.
Yeah. I think the characters are poorly. They're poorly written because it's kind of hammy at times with like how the information about them comes out, but. It's not even so much that there's potential depth. Like there's nothing wrong with like on paper, like main character, has a history with drugs and is trying to get back to her son, and that's all fine. But I don't know. I think part of it as well is the idea that she ends up bonding with Abigail and they ends up working with her by the end was kind of a weird plot direction for me that I just didn't like very much.
Yeah,
I don't know. I was never just into that.
Yeah, again, I want like Abigail to be this kind of ruthless, like scary monster. Like I don't want to end up rooting for her in the end.
Well, I'm okay rooting for her as long as it's like a Jason Voorhees thing where I'm like, sure. Kill everyone or whatever. Instead, we have like vampire on vampire fighting at the end, which like it wasn't terrible. Like I'm not saying it was like 2010's Wolfman where I'm just like, this is embarrassing how bad this is, but it's not interesting to me. Like the ending was veering more towards a Renfield almost, right? Where it's just the big fight scene, right? Blood spurting everywhere, lots of CG blood at that. It just when it goes in that direction, I'm just like. You've just gradually taken the things away that could have made me interested in this movie, and by the time we get there, it's just kind of like, oh, that's what this is now. So even the premise that I thought was good, you've completely done away with, and it's now become this. And that's always tough. Like, just because I don't like where a story goes doesn't mean it's always objectively a bad direction to take a story in. But I certainly do not like where this story goes. I think this is the wrong direction for this movie.
Yeah, it's a shame. I don't know. I was actually like, I don't want to say I was like the most excited, but I was like somewhat looking forward to this movie. Like you said, it didn't like Ready or Not, but I did like, both the Scream movies and again, the trailer and the premise, both like promising enough that, and I didn't hear much about the movie, but it's not like I heard negative things. So I was like fairly hopeful going in. And then, it was just very average, like the whole time through. Yeah,
it's lukewarm at best is how I would describe it. But to actually go through some of the stuff in the movie, I think I think I know when I'm just not interested in a movie that much, when I'm thinking about like some of the beats that we should probably talk about, and I'm like, I just don't want to talk about these. I don't care about the extended period near the start where Joey goes up to talk to her and try and bond with her a little bit and find out who her dad is, and because there's a whole sub thing running through this of like, who's her dad, and she's this crime boss's daughter, so they think, oh, that's scary, maybe we've barked up the wrong tree. And then there's like stories of how this crime boss has got an enforcer who once somehow killed 3 men who were in protective custody like on the 30th floor of a skyscraper or something, and it's like, oh, this is like a stuff of legends. And it's when they try to leave at that point where all the shutters come down and it's like, you cannot leave, you're trapped in here with this girl, and it goes from there. And I think all of that first section arguably takes too long to get to, oh, she's a vampire, because it takes a good 40 minutes or something like that before we get to that point where they go in and she actually like breaks out of her handcuffs. Like, she could always, the entire time she was just kind of toying with them, and goes to try and kill them. I think by this point, like Dean, the kind of the idiot character, he's already been killed by this point.
Yeah. So he dies first, like off camera.
Yes. He's found with his head just kind of like sitting on his shoulders, but then when Kathryn Newton touches him, the head just rolls off.
Yeah. I did think there was one little funny moment where I think he was like going down to I think it was like the kitchen area or something, when he was by himself and like some rats or something jump out, and there was this like little moment where like he raised his like fist like he was gonna like fight a rat or something, and that was like a small little character thing that I thought was actually pretty funny. But then yeah, next scene he's just like at the table, head falling off.
Yep. I mean, like I say, I was kind of glad he died first because I did find his character very annoying.
Yeah, I called that like pretty early on, like because his character is so obnoxious. I was like, oh well, surely he's gonna die like first, right?
Yeah, he's kind of there to one hit on Kathryn Newton's character, despite her constantly like no selling any of his advances, and also to just kind of bring out confrontation when no one else is going to naturally do it, just because he's the sort of character who just sort of starts opening his mouth for no reason, kind of thing. But that's pretty much that. And then the next kill is not until after they know she's a vampire and they're scared and they're sort of looking around and they're like, oh, what do we do here? And there's a little period where Joey and Rickles, who is named after Don Rickles, that's when Giancarlo Esposito names them all. He gives him Rickles. But he says, hey, I don't really trust any of the others, but you seem quite smart, so let's watch each other's backs. But that alliance is pretty short-lived because he ends up dying next in a very quick manner. So
yeah, and his death was pretty disappointing, I thought. It looked like it was going to be cool because you see...
I was gonna say it's another off-camera one, effectively, which is fine, because they do the creepy thing where he's standing there, you can tell something's wrong, but that's now 2 deaths in a row that have been effectively off-camera.
Yeah, like I kept thinking it was gonna be something like, okay, she's gonna approach him and then like turn around and you're gonna see like Abigail is on top of him, like sucking her blood, or like he was just gonna be like eviscerated, and it was more like he just had like, just some scratches like on his face, like very deep ones, but like I don't know, it didn't really do anything for me.
It was more of a hole because you could see some of his teeth through his cheek.
Oh yeah.
So it was more of a big wound, but it was also still not that exciting. And I think part of it may be how they're using CG. It may be, I don't know, some creative choices they're making here. But yeah, like for some reason, all the gore in Radio Silence movies thus far has been very kind of just like to me, regardless of what they're doing.
And also, I don't know, if you think about it logically from like a story standpoint, so, okay, they lure them there, obviously she's going to kill them, and obviously it's because they have wronged, her father's empire in some way, but also they're there to be like her food.
Yes.
Right? But it never actually seems like she like feeds on them. Like, it's not like, okay, the first guy, his head's off, but it's not like there's just like blood everywhere or anything, and then same with the second guy. It's like, okay, yeah, he has like that hole, but it doesn't look like, I don't know, like something she would have been feeding on. I don't know.
I mean, you can only... Yeah, the second one you can't really defend because it's so quick and it happened in a split second. The first guy, at least she might have had some of that blood before she set his body up at the table. Like, we don't know, but... Yeah, you're right. Like, it feels more like she's just hunting and killing them rather than actually doing much feeding, which... is just, I don't know, it's whatever. From here, like, they actually try and like go in and attack her. They get some steaks out of the pool cues and they get some garlic. There's a joke here where Kathryn Newton doesn't know what garlic is and brings out some onions, which, I mean, I guess that tells you the tone they're going for, if nothing else. But
I thought that was an okay joke. Like, I don't know, it was fine.
It's an okay joke, but it kind of like, I'm like, I guess I'm disappointed by the tone when that's a joke you're making at this point. It's like you've just discovered that vampires are real and that she's seemingly very scary, right? Or she should be scary to you anyway. And we're doing, I don't know, this type of comedy. I don't know. It's just a bit off for me.
It's kind of funny because on one hand, I was glad that they, were pretty quickly like, oh my god, she's a vampire, because sometimes that's like so annoying in a movie where like these very obvious things are happening, but like people are just like, no, this can't be that, and it's like, dude, like a Frankenstein just ripped your arms off, like it's pretty obvious what's going on. So I do like that they weren't really pussyfooting around that, but kind of like you were saying though, like they get maybe like a little too into it, like.
Oh, they start dropping references to vampire movies like immediately.
Yeah, and that's like the kind of tone I didn't like. Like it felt like they're trying to be that very meta, kind of witty, modern, jokey style, which it just doesn't work for me. Like, yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, I think that the problem I have with that is not just that. I mean, obviously, I hate the super meta thing where they're like, oh, well, is it an Anne Rice vampire? Or is it a Twilight vampire? Or is it a whatever vampire? Because they're all very different, right? That's one thing, which is a bit on the nose. But the other problem I had with this is that this scene where they're having this conversation and the camera's kind of spinning around and cutting between them, and they're like, okay, let's think, what kills a vampire? And they kind of, it feels like they're having to think about it and like think about the different rules. Like, well, garlic, oh, what about wooden stakes? Oh, sunlight's one. Oh, what about this? And I'm like, I feel like if you so quickly yelled out, that's a vampire, like right after you saw her with her teeth biting someone or lunging towards someone, and yet you had to stop and think about what the main rules of what a vampire are. I feel like if you know a vampire well enough to immediately go, that's a goddamn vampire, I feel like you already know the rules. You already know sunlight, stakes, beheadings, like...
Especially... Yeah, if you're dropping like Anne Rice, like you clearly like know something about vampires.
But it's like they're like, okay... It's like they're thinking back to school and being like, okay, what did chemistry teach us about killing vampires? Yeah. Oh, this was one. Like... It's like, these are not complicated rules, and if you're making references to these movies, then you should be hitting us quite quickly with what the rules, at least what you expect them to be. Obviously, they find out that half of them don't really work in this movie, and that's fine, because this movie can have its own rules, and it's like, oh, the crosses don't work, fine, she doesn't care about that. Oh, the garlic doesn't work either, fine, who gives a shit? It's fine. That's all okay. But which is weird because to me that almost feels like it's trying to feel more like a grounded, realistic vampire by having some of that hokey stuff not work. But then when they get hit with sunlight, they just explode into blood, and it's this comical effect. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
I don't know. I just wasn't like. I think people who like this movie are just going to think we're moany, and we're just like, you're just negative Nancy's. You're not in the spirit of it. But I think. For me to be in the spirit of it, I would need to actually enjoy the pacing and like the way the plot goes throughout the movie, like the way they interact with the vampire, the sort of the cat and mouse games they would play with her throughout the movie. I think all that stuff has to be better than it is for me to actually enjoy this. I can enjoy a lighthearted tone of a vampire movie or a horror movie, but
absolutely,
it has to actually. I don't know. It has to be fun, and this is just sort of full of too many like modern like little meta commentary staples and lukewarm direction and like just, I don't know. I'm just underwhelmed. I'm underwhelmed, Tim. Right? I'm underwhelmed, and I'm ranting.
I mean, if people like this movie, then all the more power to you. There's nothing wrong with liking a movie. I wish I liked it better. Again, I was hopeful going into it, and again, yeah, it does probably sound like being very negative, but I didn't have like a horrible time. Like, it's not like I was pulling my hair out like, oh, this is the worst movie ever. But it's just that it was very middle of the road to me.
Well, I think that's my problem is I went in being optimistic and I was giving it every chance I could, and I liked some elements of at least the premise, if nothing else. And I was like, okay, this isn't... I knew pretty early, okay, I'm not going to love this, but I think I might think it's a perfectly fine movie by the end. But it was so underwhelming by the end that I'm actually almost more annoyed at this movie than I am a movie that's worse.
Oh,
right?
Sure, yeah.
Like a movie that's like a 3 out of 10, I think I'm less annoyed at than this, because I'm actually just so frustrated that this is like just constantly just not enough in every single way. Like every single element is just a little under par, and it's really annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it's always kind of the ones that are a little more annoying or tougher to talk about, because at least if it's overly bad, then you kind of make fun of it and you can have some fun at maybe the dumb choices or the cheesiness or whatever. Or obviously if it's very good, then you can really sing the praises and talk about what you loved about it. But when it's just kind of in the middle like this, it makes it kind of tough or like annoying to dig into it exactly why it's maybe underwhelming or didn't do much for you. But yeah, unfortunately that's the state of the movie.
I mean, I think you can. I mean, I think the building blocks are there to dissect and say, why doesn't this work? Like, I think one of the big ones that I talked about already is this idea that there's like no progression with Frank as a character. He's the exact same at the start as he is the second before he becomes a vampire, and then he's just like a super villain once he's a vampire. Which you know, because like the next part of the next sort of big chunk of the movie is effectively where they devise a plan to knock her out with a syringe. So they all go looking for her and eventually find her. I don't even remember how, and to be honest, I don't care. But they're able to syringe her, and they end up locking her up inside like the elevator. So it's one of those old-fashioned like caged elevators. So they use it as a cage, and they put her in there. And this is where we just stop for like 10 minutes, and Abigail reveals who they all really are, all their real names, how they all pissed off her father in some way because, you know, the cop like infiltrated like part of his regime and like took out 3 of his lieutenants, or arrested them, and then she killed the 3 lieutenants. So that was the story about the hotel thing like earlier. And then, you know, Joey's backstory with her kid and the others. Like, she just basically points out all of their backstories and who they are. And, you know, I think Kathryn Newton like stole money via hacking from one of her dad's accounts, and that's why she's been picked for this. And I think one of the big things here for me is that I just don't really care about all of this mystery about who her father is. For a few...
Oh yeah, no, that's, to me that's not the movie. Like, the movie's not called Abigail's Dad.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of different reasons. One, all of this talk about this crime syndicate is just so freaking dull and uninteresting. And then number 2 is that it's painfully obvious who her dad's going to turn out to be. And all of this, as you put it earlier, pussyfooting around, pretending that we don't know. Especially since, I don't know if you noticed, Tim, but the music that Abigail's dancing to in the opening scene, and then the music that she plays throughout the movie in the house, that was just kind of ballet sounding. Do you recognize that music, Tim? Do you know what that music's also used in heavily?
It didn't occur to me, so you have to tell me.
Dracula!
Of course.
1931's Dracula. It's the music that plays at the start, if I remember correctly. So, yes, her dad is Dracula. They never say it, right? They never say it out loud, but that's clearly who he is at the end when he shows up.
So I really hated this, like, because at first I thought that, like, she had a crime boss, a father, who was just human, but then, like, her daughter got turned into a vampire, and instead of, like, you know, trying to, I guess, show her affection or, like, you know, cure her or do whatever, you know, because he's, like, an evil person, he, like, uses her as, like, a hitman now. I think that's a much more interesting story than just, like, oh, your father is a big bad vampire and you're a big bad vampire. Like, yeah.
Yeah, what's so weird about it is that going into it, because I remember thinking this in the trailer, her dad's going to turn out to be Dracula, and one of the reasons why I thought that was, one, because it's such an obvious twist, but also because when this movie was being rumored before we knew what the name was, it kept being referred to as Radio Silence or doing a Universal Monsters project. So
that's right.
There was always that link in my head that this had something to do with one of those characters. So I just always went in thinking Dracula was going to show up. Which
I forget if maybe I'm thinking about another movie, but I want to say, like, people even might have been calling it Dracula's daughter or something like that at some point, unless I may be conflating it with something else.
No, I think someone did. I think there was a period when it was being referred to. I don't know if it was ever officially called that, but at least at some point the press had referred to it as that.
Sense, yeah.
So obviously it's not exciting building up to it, but at the same time, like, I went into it thinking that would be a cool element. I actually thought, oh, maybe it'll be cool when Dracula shows up like an even badder, meaner version of a vampire at the end, where he's just all in shadows and they treat him like he's, I don't know, like Satan himself has walked into the building, like Nosferatu or something. And instead, it's just the most cheesy, bland. There's a guy in a coat who just walks in and hisses and says, "I can smell your blood." And I'm like, I hate this. Is the most boring implementation that you could possibly do of this guy being Dracula. All he actually says, of course, is that I've went by many names, and that's it. That's all you get.
Yeah, like I said, with most of the movie, a lot of it was just that kind of straight down the middle, average, I'm not loving it, I'm not hating it. This aspect I really hated. Like I could have so done without this little ending part.
Yeah, and you knew it was coming. You knew it because the dad was being teased the entire time. He was always going to show up at the end. It was just the obvious thing to do. They do a whole thing here where Abigail says, hey, if one of you lets me out of the cage, I'll let two of you live. And they don't take her up on the offer. And then she goes, okay, that offer expired. If one of you let me out, I'll let that person live. But that's it. And Kevin Durand's character decides to actually try and do it. And he holds out his gun and he's going to let her out. And then Joey shoots him. And then he just kind of everyone just forgets this happened for the rest of the movie. There's zero tension between him and the others after this. Even to the point where he's still the nice one. And no one seems to hold a grudge. No one seems to think, oh, we can't trust him now. Nothing comes of it. It's so weird.
I always feel like there's a lot of weird, we're in this one room, now let's go backtrack to another room.
Yes.
After she shoots him, she's like, all right, now let's go in the other room and I'll patch you up. And I'm like, I mean, I'm sure her supplies are probably whatever in the room, but I'm like, why can't you just do it here? Why do we have to go back to another room just so a character can be left alone with Abigail?
Well, that's why, yeah. A character needs to be left alone with Abigail for the next part. So that's why we're doing that. Yeah, I think you can do this effectively. One of the things I like in bottle movies, especially when you're in a building like this, is that you can start to get to know the geography and understand where things are, so that you have an instant understanding when a character's in danger, how far they are till safety, and you can play with that, and you can teach the audience what the layout of the building is. This movie doesn't do that. You're right, though. It just kind of feels like we return to the same couple of rooms a lot, which just feels repetitive in a way that's not very entertaining. But Dan Stevens is left alone with Abigail, and she's like, hey, my offer still stands, let me out, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of goes up to pretend as if he's going to do it, but he doesn't. But then she just throws the door open because she's got super strength, and it's haha, I can get out anytime I wanted.
And before this too, she tells him about a secret way to get out by pulling this book in the library.
Yeah, which turns out to be a lie because it's not the book she said it was. But then later on in the movie, Joey comes out from a secret area into the library, so the door was there somewhere. It just wasn't where she said it was.
Yeah, but I don't know. A lot of this stuff just feels so pointless. There's something interesting with we have the monster trap, but then it's she's trying to make deals and try to turn them against each other, but then she's just was able to get out the whole time anyway. But it just feels kind of cheap when it's I can pretty much do anything whenever it's convenient.
Well, that's the problem. As soon as they find out she's a vampire, they're like, oh, she was just playing with us the whole time. She was just pretending to be handcuffed to the bed, and she was just messing with us. And then again in the cage, she's just pretending to be contained. She's just messing with us again. When everything turns out to be like that, it never feels like the characters ever actually thought of anything that would be effective against her. It makes it all feel just kind of oh, so she's just unstoppable then, which can work in a sort of unstoppable killing machine kind of way. But when I watch Halloween, I don't want to see where Michael Myers pretends that he's being captured,
Right.
Unless it's about getting to a location, he's going to let himself be captured, so they'll put him in a cell next to someone else or something like that. But that's not what makes it work. If you're going to have someone be an unstoppable force, then have them be an unstoppable force that's coming at them like a Terminator, not someone who's constantly playing the mind games with them or something. I don't know.
Okay. But how good would a Michael Myers in prison Halloween movie be?
Oh, no, yeah. If he is in prison and he gets out of his cell and he just starts killing everyone in the prison, I mean, that'd
be fun.
That could be something. There's something to that. When she gets out, though, and the others sort of rush in and try and fight her, it's daytime now. It's morning. So they pull down the boards in the window, and some sunlight hits her arm, and her arm explodes, and then it starts to grow back instantly. So they all just run away to the library and hold up in there for a little while. Also, Kathryn Newton gets bit in the arm during that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that was a little bit earlier. I think that was before they knocked her out. But either way, she got bit in the arm. So she's actually concerned that she's going to become a vampire. To the point where when they go to the library, she walks towards the beam of light coming from the skylight, and she's like, putting her hand out as if, oh, is my hand going to blow up? I don't know. And then it doesn't. And she's like, oh, good, I'm not a vampire. Relief. Oh, my reflection's in the tray. Great.
Yeah.
I'm not a vampire. Great. But lol, she kind of is. But more on that in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts before I go to the next bit?
No, I mean, it's all just it's all just pretty dull. Like, yeah, because when you're trying to like recount the movie, it is just like a lot of like, oh yeah, so they're there, they meet Abigail, and then they run back to this place, and then they talk for a while, and then they run into Abigail again, and then they run back to this other room, and they talk for a while. It's just like, feels like there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I think the two things I would say, based on just what you just described there about like just the mundanity of just how it moves through its plot, is that one, none of the scenes have like really impactful cinematic moments that you remember for being effective, where that was a really tense scene because of the situation that we're in with Abigail, or that was a really scary scene, or that was like a really like memorable like piece of lore that was explored or like it was revealed. And then on top of that, it also points to the idea that nothing super like big or important feels like it's happening in these scenes, right? Like nothing ever feels like, oh, that's elevated the plot by what's happened here. That's introduced a new element. It never actually really, like, I suppose that the first thing that does happen that kind of elevates things and takes it in a new direction is the fact that Kathryn Newton turns out to be a vampire and kills Kevin Durand's character. But she's specifically not a full vampire because... So later on, we find out that the full process of siring someone so the vampires can be themselves and be like their own vampire is the classic, they have to drink the blood of the vampire too, right? That's the full siring process. But Kathryn Newton was only bitten, which means she's only a vampire puppet, meaning Abigail is controlling her just telepathically or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was actually maybe the thing I liked most about the movie, because this was an interesting idea. I feel like that I'd never really seen, at least I can't think of seeing something like this before. So I just thought like, oh, this is like a cool bit of like lore and a fun idea that they're implementing. And I think Kathryn Newton is like a very, she's like a very good, charming actress and stuff. So I thought she pulled off, like kind of being like puppeted and stuff in like a fun way. So this is probably like the one, it's not like a super long scene or anything, but this is maybe like the one part of the movie where I was like, okay, like I perked up a little bit. I don't really have many complaints about this.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure how to feel, to be honest, in this scene. Like, if this was the route they took and it became almost more like a vampire Evil Dead movie where some of them were going to start turning into vampire puppets and that's how it was going to play out, that'd be something. But I was kind of like, okay, so she's going to start turning them into vampires, so we're going to have like multiple vampires. And I think part of me was like, I was into more the idea of just having one enemy and like just she's that dangerous, they'll have to deal with her. So that just sort of leads to the other thing I didn't like, which is that wants to find Giancarlo Esposito in a secret security room, and he's also a vampire and he wants to kill Abigail. So he's like, hey, How about it, Dan Stevens? How about I turn you into a vampire and we can rule the empire together once we take down her and her old man? And he's like, sure, why not? Bite me.
I agree completely with this. Like, again, the movie is called Abigail. Like, I don't think there should be more than one vampire. So I like the Kathryn Newton stuff because I thought it was like a new, interesting idea. And I wouldn't want them to do that with every character. But if they did it with just her as... this is like another reason that Abigail is like scary and dangerous and another power that she can do. Like,
and we should point out, she dies pretty quickly after this because as soon as the other characters come and find her in the dead body of Kevin Durand's character, they just sort of like break down like something covering the window, and she just gets hit with sunlight and just completely explodes into blood.
Wait, was it her or was it someone else that they used the mirror to reflect the sunlight at? I think that may have been her, actually. Yeah. She chases them into the library and they hold up the tray. It's the reflective, like it's like a metal tray for serving tea or whatever, but it's like it's very reflective, and she holds it up and sort of bounces the light at her, and it makes her pop. Yeah, it was very. Was it is it Ocarina of Time when you get the mirror shield and you have to like you keep reflecting the light? It reminded me of that.
Tim, I have never played a Zelda game, so I cannot help you.
You filthy casual. Right. One day you'll be a true gamer and and play some real games.
I mean, maybe if they tempt me with that Switch too, but as of yet, not for me, Timbo, not for me. Once it gets to this point, right, and it's like, okay, Giancarlo Esposito is also a vampire, and he wants to take down Dracula and Abigail, so he turns Dan Stevens into a vampire. But Dan Stevens immediately just kills him and says, "That's for double-crossing me, you prick." And then now he's a vampire, and now the movie's basically, oh, now Joey's under threat from Frank, who's a vampire, and even Abigail's under threat from him because he wants to kill her too. So we get to this point where Abigail's like, "Hey, I'm not at full strength. If you help me kill him, like I'll let you go." And does the whole pinky promise thing again, because that's something earlier in the movie when they still thought she was a girl, Joey was trying to make her feel better by giving her a pinky promise that they wouldn't hurt her. So this is like, okay, all right, you're making a callback. That's all fine. At one point, Joey like gets thrown off like the upper balcony of the library, and Abigail comes swooping in and catches her with her super strength. And I'm like, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's just, it's like, okay, it's vampire versus vampire. It's lots of biting. It's lots of blood spurting all over the place, and it's getting thrown around a lot because they've got super strength. So there's a lot of like, jumping and throwing and all the rest of it. And it all just looks a bit silly. I think the comparison I would make here is like, you remember how in Let the Right One In, and again, a little bit unfair to compare it to maybe the best vampire movie of all time, but there's that one scene in Let the Right One In where there's like a silhouette of like Eli jumping on like a I guess like a homeless person or whatever, but she jumps on this guy in a very animalistic way, and it's all in silhouette, but it feels like really vicious the way she jumps on him. And then the remake, which isn't necessarily a bad movie, but there's like a similar moment of the same scene, but it looks a lot more goofy and CG because of the way the character jumps. And every single movement with these vampires feels hokey. It feels campy, and in a way that I just wasn't really into. But
no, I agree. Like, I never like obviously, vampires have, like almost superpowers, like, with like strength and speed and stuff. But I never like when they're portrayed like, like a typical superhero battle or something. Like, it just takes all of the fun and mystique out of it.
I think, because I always say this about supernatural horror in general, I think you have to conceal it as much as possible. You have to make it feel like this is the unknown, and it's so imposing, and it's so like we can't comprehend kind of thing. Now I know we can comprehend vampires to an extent, but I think their power and mystique should feel like a sleight of hand almost, as opposed to they're running around like the Flash, or they're they're throwing people around like they're Hulk or something. Like it feels silly.
Like they can be intimidating by just like like you're saying, like just being kind of creepy and in the shadows and almost seeming more like like a sleight of hand, like magic trick or something, versus like they don't have to be built like Superman or the Flash or something. Like it's not good.
And we're at this point in the movie where Abigail's like more sympathetic. She's helping the main character, so I don't like that they've quote unquote defanged her. And then like you've got the main villain now, Frank, who is just like talking constantly and saying that he's going to do this, that he's going to do that. I'm going to kill you, you little bitch. I'm going to do this, and like
I'm going to go and like kill your kid. It's like, all right, well, I don't know if it's because he's a vampire now or something, but it did seem like he went from like being like, okay, he seems like evil because he's kind of a ratty person who's looking out for himself. And I guess you can say like, oh, well, being a vampire like really amped that up, but now it just seems like he's being like over the top, like, okay, like why are you gonna kill her kid and stuff? Like, do you hate her that much? Like, it seemed like
it's reminded me a big source of conflict in the first chunk of the movie was actually that they weren't supposed to show Abigail their faces, and they were always meant to like wear a mask or whatever. And he walks in, he doesn't know that her blindfold's been taken down, and he freaks out because she sees him. And I thought, oh, that's going to be a big like plot point for a while, and it ended up being kind of just pushed aside very quickly and not mattering that much. And I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. I don't know. Like, I guess, and in the grand scheme of things, we know it's not going to matter because she's a goddamn vampire. But, like, I don't know. It almost felt like the movie felt like it should have been like a mix of Panic Room and a vampire movie, and instead it's, I don't even know what I'd compare it to instead, but it's not that. It doesn't have that sort of intense Panic Room thriller kind of vibes. But I'm imagining those criminals arguing about what to do, because that was a movie where one of the criminals was sympathetic. Forrest Whitaker's character was this sympathetic guy who clearly was a better person than the other two. So there's definitely things here. The problem is though is that the villain in this case is the kid, but like that turns it on its head. Maybe you can have fun with that, but I don't know. Anyway.
And it also does that thing that's kind of annoying too, where it's like, okay, he's a vampire for 2 seconds, but he's like this unstoppable vampire that like everyone has to really team up and like do their best to to defeat him. Yeah,
well, he bites Abigail and then it acts like she's dead for a minute. Obviously she jumps in like 2 minutes later and it's fine, and it's like okay, it makes sense that biting the vampire wouldn't kill her, because why would it? But she's like, oh, I'm not at full strength now, so I need help. So that they're fighting together. They do a thing here where he bites Joey and he's like, oh, you're going to be my puppet now. But then she's not. And then Abigail's like, oh, funny thing about being a vampire, it takes a long time to learn to do all the cool shit. And it's like, okay, so that's it. All right. Okay, that's
cool.
So the puppet thing didn't work because of that. And I get why, but it's also very convenient that once he's dead, because they kill him, obviously, with the sunlight or whatever, where they stake him. But she's like, hey, am I, what about this bite? Am I okay? And she's like, oh, he's dead now, you're fine, you've been released. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you're telling me Kathryn Newton would have been fine had we killed you? That's what you're telling us then. All right, good to know.
Sure. It also just makes, like, I don't know, the villain feel like pretty dumb, where it's like, yeah, you didn't really have any reason to believe that you could just do this. Like,
yes.
Honestly, like, I'm sure there's more to it than just like thinking about it.
My least favorite part of it though is that Joey pretends that she is a puppet for like 30 seconds. Like, she sort of follows his orders because he's like, get up now, walk towards her and kill her, and she's sort of walking towards like a zombie, and I'm like, she's clearly just pretending, because she's not even acting like Kathryn Newton was when she was being puppeted. She's not like acting like a vampire. She's keeping her mouth closed. She's and not only that, like, I didn't even expect an explanation for why she wasn't a puppet yet, because even when Kathryn Newton became a puppet, she was bitten like hours before that happened.
Oh yeah, it took a while. Yeah,
it took a while. So I just thought it was that, and that'd be fine. But instead we get Abigail with the one-liners.
God damn it. Yeah, again, for the most of the movie, I was like, all right, this is, I'm not loving this, but it's like, whatever. The ending I really didn't like.
That's the thing, though. I think it's just fine and bland for so long that at a certain point that started to piss me off. I reached the event horizon where I was like, okay, I'm annoyed at how just bland this is at this point, and how much it feels like I should be liking these characters. Like, if I was liking these characters, and that's not to say they have to be better people, right? I'm not saying they have to be better in that sense, right? I'm saying that they should be more like a likable gang of rogues that I care about. Whether that's, compare that to like another team of villains, compare that to a Guardians of the Galaxy, compare that to a whoever, right? I'm sure there's better comparisons to be made, but I can't think of any.
It's also kind of weird that, like, I don't know, I feel like the characters didn't all feel like completely unique. Like, you had the driver guy, and then Kevin Durant's character, like, they were like both kind of playing like, the dumb, like, oaf kind of guy, I feel like. And then you had like Rickles and Joey, like, okay, like, you're both like ex-military, like, seems like you're good guys stuck in like a bad situation kind of thing.
I don't think we've even mentioned it yet, but yeah, Joey was a military like medic until she got canned for being a junkie, effectively, which which, by the way, take a shot every time Dan Stevens calls her a junkie in this movie. You'll be blind drunk by the end.
But I don't know, it's just weird that it's not like it's not like something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like each character feels very like unique and different ways, and like this is kind of like, well, that character is kind of like that, and that person's kind of like that person.
I think ultimately there's just some of this is subjective, obviously, but I just don't think that Abigail should have been talking as much as she was, because they were going for the kind of creepy talking kid thing, and I feel that's overplayed. I always think it's a little bit hokey for the most part. I think she should have been like a monster that was sticking to the shadows, and except for maybe a few key things where she maybe did try and like lure someone out with a voice or something, but it just, I don't know. Like, and part of this, of course, is like a like what I think the movie should be aiming for versus what the movie's actually aiming for. And I do admit that I just kind of want a bit of a different movie. But even for what the movie's aiming for, I feel like it is just underwhelming in almost every way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, I just don't think it's as fun as it feels like it should be. I don't think that the vampire stuff is as entertaining as it should be. And I don't think the characters are as likable as they probably should be to me. Because I think that would be a big thing. I think if everything else was the same, but I liked the characters and cared about them a bit more, I think that would have done the world of difference for at least elevating this past just its middling to, oh, it's actually got some good qualities to it, and I cared about a couple of them, so that's what made the difference. Yeah, then Dracula shows up, and I didn't like that performance. Matthew Good plays Dracula. You've probably seen him in a bunch of stuff before.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah. I just didn't like this portrayal of Dracula either. It's just not my style of Dracula.
No, it looked bad.
Yeah, because I was thinking, because it's like, you know, they keep playing the music from the original Dracula, and I don't know if that was music that was written for Dracula or if it's like actually just an old piece of music that they used in Dracula, so they're using it again here. I have no idea. But when he showed up from behind, I thought, was he black and white? Are they going to do some sort of weird effect here where it's like they're going for like the actual black and white Bela Lugosi? And that'd have been interesting. It'd have been kind of weird, but
what do you call it? Like when you like use like a dead actor's like image, like at the end of the Flash or whatever.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I was still expecting it to be someone just look like him, but, you know, sort of the hair slicked back, the same kind of like cloak or whatever. Instead, you know, it was just sort of a generic guy in a suit with the fangs. But yeah, I thought maybe they were going to go for something kind of cool to harken back to the original Dracula or something like that, because they'd been playing that music the whole time. It wouldn't have rescued the movie by any means, but I was kind of expecting something a bit more, even if it wasn't good, something with a bit more balls. Which I think that's the big problem with this, is that I feel this movie feels, I call it toothless earlier, but I guess the other way to say it's also ballless. It has no balls. It feels like it's not taking any big swings, and just, you know, tepid. It's tepid. There's another good word for it. Tepid.
No, I mean, I think those are all very valid ways to describe this movie. This is just one where after watching it one time, I don't think I will ever have any desire to like revisit it.
No.
I can't imagine ever thinking about this movie again, honestly.
Yeah. And I feel out of touch sometimes, because I think the younglings, right, the Gen Z people, I think they're more into this, the horror fans of that generation. And maybe this is a thing where maybe there's like a whole group of movies that we like from like 15, 20 years ago that they just wouldn't get.
Sure,
and we like them. That's possible. But there's movies that transcend all that shit, right? There's movies that are great no matter which era you're from, right? There's a reason why we can go back to Halloween, we can go back to The Shining, we can go back to whatever, and they're still perfect today. I think this might work for a certain audience, but I don't think it holds up overall as a movie that works for, you know, any horror fan that wants to find something in it.
I mean, ultimately, whether you like a movie or not, it's gonna be your opinion. So again, if there are people that love this movie, like, that's totally fine. That, you know, our dislike shouldn't, you know, degrade that in any way. But I mean, I think we had very valid, you know, complaints about it. Like, it's not like we're just like, well, we don't like this movie because we're old. Like, I
would love to love bland ass movies like this. You know how much happy I would be all the time if this bland ass movie pleased me?
I do think about that sometimes. Like, yeah, like sometimes you talk to people and everything is just like, oh yeah, I like that movie. Oh yeah, that movie was good. Oh, I did see that movie. That was really good. Oh, you know what movie I really liked? Everything that's ever came out. Like, I was like, man, what a blissful life you must lead, where you're not constantly watching stuff and like balling your hands into fists and just being like, this is stupid.
The problem is, though, is that people who are like that, and I have met them, is that eventually you get to a movie that's a good movie, but it's more of a challenging movie, and that's when they say they don't like something because they didn't get it, right?
Yeah.
Not to make fun of dumb people, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But people who like a lot of bland movies, they get to something that's a bit more. Not even that surreal, even just something like It Follows, right? Where they'll say, "Oh, that's a bit weird," and like, the premise is silly. But this movie where vampires are trash talking as they're exploding into blood, that's great. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy some schlocky. I love some schlocky stuff, but
Of course, yeah.
I do find that there's a correlation there, right? Where they'll like all the mainstream stuff, but the second you show them something a bit weirder, a bit more art house, I don't know. Maybe I'm generalizing too much, but
yeah. And nothing's like worse than like you're really excited about like, oh, like you like horror movies, like you gotta check out like this cool indie movie. It's like one of the like most inventive, unique things I've seen in years, and then like next time you talk to them, like, yeah, I tried it for about 10-15 minutes, but I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling it. And then they're like, oh, but yeah, I did just watch Smile for the 8th time. That was scary. And it's like, oh, all right.
Oh yeah, or even not getting that far and just being like, oh, you like horror movies? I love horror movies too. Oh man, what's your favorite? I love Annabelle. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. Well, I don't think we could talk about horror movies. I'm just going to get upset.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Anyway, okay, we went on a bit of a rant there. I just, for the record, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you loving a movie that isn't necessarily that good. I think the key thing I'm pointing out with that little rant is that as long as you have a healthy amount of movies that you both like and dislike, just to sort of feel that you actually have opinions, that things will sometimes rub you the wrong way, I think that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
I think what's healthy is that there's enough movies that you don't like as well, because that says you actually, you have a taste. Some things are working for you, some things are not. And sometimes it's not for objectively good reasons. Sometimes it's just because you like this type of silly thing, and that speaks to you in a way that this other silly thing doesn't. That's perfectly fine. What worries me is when you like everything. That's when that's when I question you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people will say this is maybe like a too negative thing to ask, but I feel like, yeah, when you're talking to someone, like, and instead of being like, oh, what's your favorite movie, like, it's more interesting to be like, all right, what movie do you hate? Like, what's your, like, what movie really like gets under your skin? I think that's maybe a more interesting thing if like you're talking to movies with someone.
Yes. Get to the interesting stuff. What are you actually passionate about? And yeah. So anyway,
what's your favorite movie? Oh, I like Star Wars. Cool. Interesting.
Oh dear.
And I say that as someone that loves Star Wars, but like, I've talked about that enough in my life. Let's talk about something else.
Oh yeah, I love how this turned into a rant about just people having bland taste. All right, let's get to the wrap up segments here. Tim, as tough as this might be, what was your favorite scene of Abigail?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it before, but I'll say when Kathryn Newton like turns and she's being puppeted. Again, I just thought that was interesting. I thought she did a good job of selling it, and it's like one thing where it's not like I thought it was like scary or tense, but it was at least an idea that I was happy with, and that actually felt like they were exploring decently enough versus a lot of the movie, which maybe had like good ideas and that they just abandon or don't feel like they really go into as much detail as I want. But I mean, that was one thing that I actually enjoyed.
I don't know if I've got one, I am thinking really hard here. I don't know. Kathryn Newton fell into a pool of dead bodies at one point in the basement.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Do I like it though? Not really. I just hadn't mentioned it yet. Yeah. I don't know. What is it? I feel like this is kind of like a cop-out answer almost. But I think the moment I noticed that the music was from Dracula was probably the most excited I ever got, because it was like, oh, that's an interesting pull to do that. Which, I probably noticed during the first scene. Am I really saying the opening scene's my favorite? I guess. It's tough. It's tough. I feel like, again, this is almost more difficult to do it with this movie because it's such a bland-ass movie for me that nothing's sticking out. Like, I'm trying to think of a joke that I liked or a moment of like horror stuff that I actually was into, and for the most part, I wasn't into the horror stuff. So I'm left with, okay, is there any character moments I like? Is there a moment of cinematography I like? And I'm really struggling to come up with anything.
There wasn't really any cool kills or anything like that. Like, again, all the gore and stuff was not that great.
No. So I guess I'll just say the opening, because I realized it was the music from Dracula after a minute and was like, oh, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah. That's a fun nod, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with that. All right, MVP of the movie?
You know, I did actually quite enjoy Melissa Barrera in this. And again, like, I never super liked her character in Scream. Like, I didn't hate her, but she definitely wasn't my favorite in a movie that I thought was, like, you know, packed with, you know, fun, memorable characters. Hers was the one that didn't really do much for me.
She was the dull, straight character surrounded by everyone else who was more fun.
Yeah, so I did think she did a good job, but I kind of want to give it to her, but I do think I am actually going to have to give it to Kathryn Newton, because, I don't know, she's just so likable and charming that, like, I don't know, she just, maybe she's just, like, a really good actress, but I do feel like she kind of, like, steals the scenes when she's in there. Because, I don't know, just something about her personality, it's usually fun to see.
Yeah, I'm thinking about who to give this to here. I feel like part of me wants to just say Esposito, just because I like Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, but that's a cop out.
Good actor.
I'm not going to do that, because it's not like his character did much for me in this.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to give it to Abigail herself. I really would, but I just think that she loses all of her luster. The more she talks, the more she just kind of like spouts exposition for like 10 minutes. I'll then give it to her. I like Dan Stevens in general, but I don't think his character's very good in this. I think I'll probably go with Barrera, just as almost a default pick. But she doesn't do anything wrong. Like, as an actress, she does not do anything wrong in this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll go with her. Melissa Barrera and a beret.
Okay. But just because her last name sounds like Beret?
Yeah, that's the joke, yes.
Okay.
If I can think of a third word that sounds similar, I'd string a sentence together, but I can't think of one, so.
Baguette? I don't know.
No. Berry, okay, you did B in the R, I think, so. Melissa Barrera and a beret eating berries in Birmingham. There you go.
Okay.
All right, what are you rating the movie, Tim? Let's kill this review.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 5.5. Yeah, I don't think I can go as high as a 6, because like 6 is something I would still, I think, would have some more redeeming qualities or be something that I enjoyed a little bit more. But I mean, I can't go too low, because on a technical level, I just don't, you know, there's not like enough bad stuff or stuff that made me angry or whatever. Like, you know, it's a competent movie. It's just a movie that really didn't work for me. It's not overly bad, but it's not overly good. So it's just really right down the middle. And then I kind of give it just a little bit extra point just for, again, having like an interesting premise and maybe a few ideas here or a few chuckles there. But overall, just really didn't do much for me.
Yeah, straight 5 out of 10 for me. In a weird way, I'm almost more annoyed at it than I would,
of course,
I should be that a 5, but it is just a 5. It's just completely bland in the middle. It's never charming enough. It's never scary enough or tense enough. It's never fun enough. The pacing's never quite there. The vampire's never quite there. The characters are never quite there. Like, everything's just a little under what it should be to actually be good. And I don't think all of them have to hit, but I think 1 or 2 of them have to hit. To
right, yeah, like
you know,
yeah, like it would have been easy, like, okay, if the characters were a little bland, but man, it had some really cool gore and kills, then yeah, fine. Or if it was like, all right, the vampire stuff was kind of weak, but man, the characters were like so funny and engaging. Like, you know, you kind of need like at least one life preserver to you know, get you through the shipwreck. But if everything is just kind of meeting that like bare minimum, for it to be like passable. It's just, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, at a certain point, I was like begging for like Aaron from Your Next to like sort of just show up and start taking charge or something. But hey, that is our thoughts on Abigail. So, if that was an overly negative review, I apologize, but I seriously was underwhelmed. Consider me underwhelmed. Next week,
Sorry.
on you go, Timmy.
Oh no.
No.
No, never mind.
Never mind. Okay, he's backed out. He's realized
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, we still have. Sure, this one didn't work for us, but I mean, we still have more fun stuff coming out through the year. Like, we have Imaginary and Tarot, and the new Smile movie.
You're intentionally picking all the ones we were expecting to be shit, Tim. Anyway. Next week is the week off for the regular show, but the exclusive episode for Patreon and YouTube memberships will be out. We're doing our third of our summer-themed sort of slasher movies for the bonus episodes for August, and that is Bloody Murder, a summer camp movie from the year 2000, which you can find on Tubi for free if you want to check it out, but that'll be on Patreon next week. And the week after that, when we're back with a regular episode, it's the winner of the current vote, so we don't know what's winning yet, but go and look at the Patreon if you would like to find out what the options are. But that is the show. You can support us by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and getting an exclusive episode every month. I feel like I normally have to promote that at this point, but I already just explained that next week's a exclusive episode, so maybe I don't. But we do even more stream segments. We did top 5 fifth horror movies. That just went out like in the last couple of weeks.
If you want to hear about good vampire movies, we had doing top 10 vampire movies.
It started as a top 5, and then there was a lot of debate about what should be included. Tim had some hot takes about what counts as a vampire movie, and then it ended up just being a top 10 by the end because we had enough for a top 10. So it was fun. This wouldn't have made the list for the record, so no danger of that. We can rest easy until another good vampire movie comes out. But hey, there's an Nosferatu movie coming out later this year by Robert Eggers.
Oh, God, yes.
So that could squeeze on there. You never know. But so that is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.